Hello everyone, it is Aussies Elect back finally here to talk about the upcoming Australian federal election. This is going to be a little prediction video. It's going to be a bit of a different style of video to my previous videos in that I am going to just do a prediction of the House and the Senate without going into too much detail, and then I'm going to make separate videos about each state and then maybe some issues and other things, just because I think otherwise the video is going to be way too long. So yes, it has been a while since I made my last video. I was waiting till a bit more stuff happened. Polls have actually been pretty stagnant. If we can go, and we're going to look at some polling. There was a recent news poll that was 50-50. There was a YouGov that was 50-50. When I last made a video, the polls were looking a bit better for Labour. They're at about 51 or 52% on the two-party preferred. If we go to the Bludger track, it was in late November when I made my last video, and yeah, the polls have narrowed a little bit since then, but not a huge amount. There wasn't the dramatic narrowing that we saw on the second half of last year. It's just been sort of like a slight narrowing from that point of like 52 to around about equal. And if you ask Kevin Bonham, it's around about 50.5 to 49.5. And I actually asked him about if there was an election on that margin, how many seats did he think that Labour would get? And he said about 74, assuming that there's no losses to the Greens. And he's also got some discussions about Greens, which I will talk about in this video as well. But not into too much detail, as I said, because I do want to do little smaller videos on each of the states, just because otherwise this video is going to be way too long if I go hyper detail on everything. So what you can see before you is the map with about 100 seats, which I believe are probably not going to go anywhere unless there's a major departure from how the polls are at the moment. I think these seats are pretty set. This includes seats like Labour picked up last time, like Reid, which they picked up on quite a big margin, and there's the sophomore effect, and for other reasons, I don't actually think they're going to go anywhere. But we will go from left to right on this. Sorry, I've got a bit of allergies. Actually, Herbert should be a retain for the coalition. That's a no-brainer, that one. Right, so we're going to start with Western Australia. So, Curtin. So, actually, I will talk about these teal seats. Now, there was a MRP poll a couple of months ago, back when Labour was ahead about 52-48. And I do believe that it predicted that all the Teals would retain their seats. I think Curtin was on quite a narrow margin. I think that is the closest of all the Teal seats. But I also believe that the Teals will maintain all their seats. Curtin did vote for the Voice. And I believe that Teal Independents aren't going anywhere with Peter Dutton as the coalition leader. Peter Dutton, he may have brought in the polls a little bit. He might have increased the primary vote for Liberal National Party, but it's not amongst the kind of people that vote for the Teals. I think they're going to very much stay where they are, and we'll get to including the ones where there's seat distributions happening, which we'll get to in a second. But we'll finish talking about Western Australia. So this was actually one where on the MRP, it said, I think there was only like a 51-49 margin to the coalition. I believe the coalition will retain that seat. I think Labour will go backwards in WA on the two-party preferred. I don't think they'll be in any room for gaining, because last election was just it was definitely an outlier for them in Western Australia, picking up 3 Senate seats especially. The question really is, with these seats, Hasluck, Swan, Tangney, and Pearce, how many of them can Labour retain with this swing against them? And the news poll state did point to a bit of a swing against Labour, like about 2 or 3%. Most of these seats are held on a pretty high margin, I believe. The one that has the lowest margin, I believe, is Tangney. Now, these seats are getting redistributed, but I don't believe it's making a huge lick of difference. I think in the case of Swan and Pearce, I think the margins are actually growing, and Hasluck, I think, as well. So I think the only one that the coalition, in my opinion, will have a chance of picking up is Tangney. And even that one I'm not sure, because it does have the sophomore effect, where a newly elected MP has just been elected. So they usually have a bit of a personal vote. So even Tangney, the coalition picking that up is a bit of but when you have, some swings, I think it's fair to give one seat of those to the coalition. We'll move on to Adelaide. Now, Boothby, it was a pickup for the Labor Party last election. I believe it was only on a 2 or 3% margin. Boothby did not vote for the Voice, although it was close to voting for it. I do not believe that the coalition will pick this one up. Again, I think they're even running the Copland again. Again, the sophomore effect. I just don't see South Australia being a big swinger to the coalition. Maybe some other states, but not South Australia. So I also think that the coalition will probably keep Sturt. There's no redistribution in South Australia, so we don't have to worry about that. When you have a swing against the Labor Party, I just don't see a seat like Sturt, which is not as progressive as some of the sort of the Melbourne seats, which we'll get to in a second. I just don't see that going to the Labor Party at this point. So I'm just going to do a status quo result for South Australia, including giving Mayo back to Rebecca Sharkey. I don't think she's going anywhere. Maybe she will get rid of the Centre Alliance and just run as an independent. I don't know. But I think Rebecca Sharkey will probably stay on that seat if she chooses to continue on that seat. So let's go on to Melbourne. There are these inner city seats here, which some people are suggesting that might go to the Greens. Now, Wills, in the redistribution which has been submitted. Now, I must preface this by saying that the redistribution is not final. And I must also stop here and say that I forgot one seat in Western Australia, which is Bullwinkle, which is the brand new seat which has been created. Apparently will have that name. And a lot of people are actually thinking that it could. I think that there was a poll recently which suggested that the Nationals were in reaching distance of picking up this seat, the WA Nationals, which they are technically separate from the coalition, but most people sort of put them together with the coalition. And I think also that probably that will be a pickup for them. The margin was a 2.5% margin, I believe, to the Labor Party, but with a bit of a swing and with a popular vote from the Nationals, which I believe she is a member of the WA Nationals in the state. She's actually an MP in the Legislative Assembly. Apparently, she's very popular, and the poll's pointing to her as a good chance. So I'm just going to say that the WA Nationals will pick up that seat. So yes, going back to this, the redistribution did suggest that the Greens will have been closing distance of about 4%, 4.5% margin of getting the seat of Wills in inner city Melbourne. Cooper, I believe there also was, the redistribution also put them in about 7% from getting that seat. I know Wills has quite a bit of renters. I know McNamara also has quite a bit of renters. So I'm going to think that Greens is going to pick up one of these three seats. I think Wills is the most likely. I think Labor will probably maintain McNamara, but it is a really like a three-horse race there. Labor could theoretically drop behind both the Greens and Coalition and make it a Greens versus Coalition race, where, I mean, you would think the Greens would win that kind of race. But I think the Greens will pick up one of those three seats. I'm going to say it's Wills. There isn't overall like a big jump in the percentage for the Greens. Like, as you can see here, 12.7%. It's up 0.4% since the election, which is really like nothing to really speak much about, really. Like, they're maintaining their support, and they did really well last time. And then maybe if it's spread, if they do a campaign in particular seats and stuff like that, it's like there's no like convincing evidence that the Greens are really, doing amazingly at the moment. Them picking up a seat in inner city Melbourne, especially one which has become easier for them after redistribution, I can see it happening. Let's go on to some of these other teal independent seats. So Goldstein, I think that seat will remain. The question is about Kooyong after the abolishment of Higgins, basically a bunch of Kooyong ate Higgins in the redistribution, if this redistribution is anywhere close to the final redistribution, that is. And it basically actually gave the seat more sort of Labor and Green support. I mean, Higgins was a Labor seat. So the redistribution suggested that it would be harder for the independent to win. It gave like a two-party preferred of like 48% to the coalition and only like 40% to the teal independent. But that's redistribute, like calculating like independent percentage on a redistribution is really difficult. I don't think Monique Ryan is going anywhere. I think she's very popular. I don't think a Liberal is going to be able to pick that up. I believe that seat voted for the Voice. So I think even with the redistribution, I think that's going to maintain with the independent, and I think Labor's gonna lose that seat ultimately, which would be Higgins. So Chisholm is another one that Labor won last time, and the margin I think is pretty small, but I think Labor will retain that one. Now Menzies and Deakin, these are both seats where after the redistribution, Labor are either on like 50-50 or like slightly ahead. These are like some of the most marginal seats for the coalition, especially after the redistribution. And I do not believe that the Labour Party will pick up either of them. I think with this swing against them, I think that the coalition will maintain both of these seats, but I think it will be quite close. That's my, and I can't remember if these seats voted for the voice or not. I know that they're somewhat progressive. They're at least moderate. But once again, there's a swing against the Labour Party, and that includes in Victoria, where a lot of people thinking like Peter Dutton wouldn't do very well, but I think he's doing well enough that he can maintain those seats. And as for Aston, Labour won it at a by-election. I think with that new member, I think they'll retain that seat. Dunkley is down here. I've already given it to Labour. The coalition couldn't win it in a by-election. I know the polls have narrowed since then. I don't think with a brand new spanking member and with a pretty convincing by-election win that there's any signal that the Labour Party will lose that seat. Right here. So McEwen. Now this is a marginal seat which is sort of half urban, half regional, kind of like Corangamite. McEwen is off northern Melbourne and sort of this regional area just above northern Melbourne. And I believe that northern Melbourne is expanding at a very rapid rate with a lot of immigrants. So this seat did not go to the coalition in 2019. And there's just a big question of if this sort of like appeal amongst outer suburban and like inner regional, this is sort of like Peter Dutton's sort of like what he's trying to go for in terms of voters. So basically, if Dutton's sort of strategy works, this is the kind of seat that the coalition could pick up. I'm not sure because it is been seen as a pretty like solid Labour seat for quite a while. And with that immigrant population, I'm not really sure. I am gonna give it to the coalition because with this swing against Labour Party, there are going to be some surprise seats, and I'm gonna think that McEwen could be one of those surprise seats. Now, Indi, I think an independent will keep that seat. I don't think there's any competition going on here. I did mark Wannon and Nichols as safe coalition seats. It was interesting because in the MRP poll from a couple of months ago, there was a suggestion that there was still quite a high independent vote in both of those seats. An independent, of course, came close to winning, two different independents, I should say, came close to winning those seats in the last federal election. So I don't know, maybe the challenges have come up again, but I think the coalition has sort of solidified themselves a bit more since the last election. Obviously, there was a big coalition backlash last election. So I think it's going to be more difficult for independents to pick up those seats this election. You know, independents have sort of taken a hold in the nation's psyche, and maybe people are more willing to get on board with the idea, so maybe I'm wrong. So going on to Tasmania. Now, I've given Franklin to the Labour Party and Braddon to the Coalition, and then I've left these other two, and of course Clark to Andrew Wilkie, and I've left these other two seats up for debate. Now, Bass, the Liberal member, and I'm completely lost on names today. This is why I need to do videos specifically on states because Bridget Archer is her name. This is why I need to do videos on specific states because I just can't do all of this at once. Bridget Archer is quite popular, and I think that she'll maintain her seat in Bass. As for Lyons, this is another one of these sort of like seats which I think like Peter Dutton is like strategizing to try to pick up. It's on quite a low margin, so I'm going to say that this seat will be won by the coalition. Now, on to New South Wales. So, Eden Monaro. Why have I got that as a blank? I mean, I think that in the redistribution, I think Hugh might have eaten some of Eden Monaro, made it not as safe, but no, I mean, Labor's going to hold that. Gilmore. Now, I have heard from my friend Sormon that some people from Canberra, public servants, have moved to Gilmore for their retirement, which means it isn't a sort of a sure like coalition pickup, even with a very small margin, as you would think. So I'm going to go that the coalition will pick up that seat, but it's still one that is sort of in doubt. It's not like a surety. I don't think any of these pickups are a surety. That's the thing. Like none of these coalition pickups, I can say I look at and say like, oh yeah, that coalition is definitely picking up that seat. I think the Labor Party could still get a majority at this point. It really depends on the campaign. It really depends on if this sort of like especially the nuclear power thing, like how well that goes down, because at the moment there's a big question mark on that. Like the coalition have not come out with their funding, and I think that's their biggest policy. So uh, I still think the Labor Party could win a majority government. At the moment, it's looking like a minority government, which this once we're done with this map, it will show. But I think that it's absolutely possible for Labor to win a majority government on these numbers. But we will continue. So Hume, I believe the margin has been lowered for the coalition there, but I'm going to keep it with them. Clare, now Andrew G, I believe is going to be running as an independent. He's the current member. He quit the Nationals over the Voice. I'm going to say he's going to win that seat. For Hunter, I believe the margin is quite big on that seat. The coalition weren't able to pick it up in 2019, which was the big mining backlash. I'm going to keep it for the Labor Party. Richmond. Now, this seat, some people have suggested it will go to the Greens. I don't think climate change is as big of an issue as it was last election, and I think that was most of where the Greens vote came from last election. So I think the Labor Party will maintain that seat. Cowper, I think I saw in the MRP poll there was a big independent vote there, and I think that might have been the case last election when there was an independent challenger. I think the coalition will keep Cowper, however. Now into Sydney. So Fowler. Now the MAP poll pointed Labor taking back this seat because obviously people were very disgusted with Christina Keneally parachuting into that seat last election, and now they'll put like a better candidate or something to the Labor Party. I mean, I'm going to say that Daly is popular enough that she will retain that seat after winning it last time. Now Watson. Now there has already been an independent challenger, a Gaza independent challenger announced. I believe he is a GP in Watson. So this is going to be a big challenge to Tony Burke, in which is usually a safe Labor seat. I believe in the seat of Watson, the population is about 25% Muslim. I don't think it's likely for the independent to win here. I think they definitely have a chance, but of course the coalition will be preferencing Labor over that independent, I would assume. So in that case, I am going to give that seat to Labor, although it is absolutely one to look at. I mean, Blaxland actually has a higher Muslim population, but I believe Jason Clare is quite popular. Tony Burke has been in the parliament for a while. He's done some things and he said some things which have caused a little bit of controversy, but not a major amount of controversy. I believe that he's still quite popular amongst even pretty strong advocates of Gaza. Jason Clare I think he's very popular. I don't think he's going anywhere, but Tony Burke, maybe. Bennelong. Now, Bennelong is very interesting because the redistribution pushed this seat to being an LNP seat in their column. It is, of course, a seat that Labor won at the last election. It's another sophomore seat that Labor won last election. I don't know. It flipped back to the coalition after the 2007 election, after John Howard was booted out of that seat. So that's another indicator that maybe the coalition will pick that seat back up. I'm going to say the coalition, this will be one of those seats that the coalition could gain. So I'm going to give it to the coalition. Bradfield. Most of Bradfield is absorbing the seat of North Sydney, which is being abolished. Bennelong is also taking some of that seat. Warringah is the other one. So Nicole Bull came close to winning the seat as an independent, a Teal independent last election. Paul Fletcher's seat, and I think he's quite popular, and it is a seat that voted for The Voice. So there's a just big question. There's two independents who are fighting for it, which is Kalia Tink, which is the current member for North Sydney, she's losing her seat, and Nicole Bull, two independents vying for that seat perhaps, and then we've got Paul Fletcher. My guess is that the independents will pick it up. I mean, Paul Fletcher was a big, strong advocate for The Voice. I don't know. I think just Peter Dutton, I just don't think he's sort of going to be winning many favours in that part of Sydney. That's just my impression. That's why I think an independent's going to pick it up. I don't know which independent is going to pick it up. There's like some suggestion that one of them is going to run for the Senate. I mean, the other option is that one of them could run from Barawa, because I think Barawa sort of has a similar demographic. I mean, it's definitely going to be more difficult to win, but is another sort of possible Teal seat. So maybe that's another option. Now, as for Wentworth, Warringah, and McKellar, I think independents are all going to maintain those seats, as I suggested earlier. Right, so in Robertson, now this is sort of like the bellwether seat, goes to whichever party wins government, usually for the last like 40 years or something like that. This seat is quite marginal. Gordon Reid picked it up last election. With the sophomore effect, I'm going to suggest that Labour will keep this seat. But yeah, that's definitely one to look at. I mean, I gave Bennelong to the coalition. I'm giving Robertson to Labour. That's sort of how it goes. Now, Patterson is another one of these sort of outer suburban. I mean, this is sort of not just outer suburban, it's like outer regional suburban seats, which is on a 5% margin. The coalition did not pick it up in 2019, but this is another seat I think that the coalition absolutely will be targeting. I'm going to say that Labour keeps the seat, given I gave McEwen to the coalition, but that is definitely one to watch. Right, now let's go on to Queensland. Queensland. Dixon. The coalition will maintain that seat. Peter Dutton will get a swing towards him, I believe, because he is now the leader, and he's done a pretty strong performance as leader. I think he's absolutely exceeded everybody's expectations. I also will say that I think Albo will maintain Grainler, but the Greens will get a massive swing towards them. It will become a much closer seat than there was before, because I think Albo has disappointed quite a bit of his constituents as leader, unfortunately. But Peter Dutton, on the other hand, swing towards him, and I think also Peter Dutton being the leader will give the coalition a strong position in Queensland in general. I do not believe the Labor Party will be picking up any seats in Queensland. I think the Labor Party will retain Blair. They managed to do that in 2019. And I don't think it's the kind of demographics that Peter Dutton would appeal to necessarily. Blair is one of those seats which absolutely take a look at. But I think the Labor Party will just retain that seat. Moreton. Now, I know that the member is basically being forced to retire because of gender quotas there. And there is a suggestion that the Greens have a chance of picking up that seat. It's not the kind of demographic that usually is a Greens voting seat. They did get 20% last time, and I think the Greens will be focusing on that seat. But I'm going to say that Labor Party will retain that seat, although it's going to be interesting. As for these three seats, which were won by the Greens last election, I'm just going to suggest that the Greens will retain them all. At the Brisbane City Council elections, the seat of Ryan, the sort of the area of Ryan, I believe that did have a bit of a swing to the coalition. Part of Ryan, not all of it, but part of it. Ryan did vote for the Voice, however, and I believe parts of Ryan did swing towards the Greens in the Brisbane City Council election. So I am going to suggest that the Greens maintain that seat. The MRP poll also pointed to the Greens retaining that seat. Brisbane, the MRP polling, I think, pointed to actually the coalition winning that seat. But, MRP polls, they have some static, they have some errors. I don't think the coalition's picking up Brisbane, but that's just my opinion. Inner city seat, and it seemed to be that the Brisbane City Council inner city seats swung to the Greens. So, Bob Katter, is he going to retire? Well, even if he does, probably his son will try to pick up this seat, I'd say. So I'm going to guess that the Katter Australia Party will retain Kennedy. Leichhardt, Warren Entsch is retiring, but I think the Liberal Nationals will be able to pick that one up. I don't think Labor's, as I said, is picking up any seats in Queensland. I don't think that's going to happen this election. I think there's going to be a bit of a swing against Labor in Queensland, maybe about 2 or 3%. Now, as for Northern Territory, we just had a state election, which was a pretty big wipeout for the Labor Party here, especially in Darwin. So Lingiari is definitely the more marginal of the two out of Lingiari and Solomon, but there will be a redistribution next year, which will probably make the seats a bit more even and make it a bit more difficult for the coalition to pick up Lingiari. There is some talks that Jacinta Price might run in Lingiari. That's not confirmed yet. My guess is that the coalition have a good chance of picking up at least one of these seats, perhaps even both. Solomon currently is on like a 9% margin, but those were some big swings against the Labor Party. The question is the issue of crime, which I think was absolutely the issue that dominated the Northern Territory election. If that will still be something that people will blame Labor on by the time the federal election comes, because it will be the country Liberals will be in power for quite a while, and perhaps people might look at them if the crime not been cleaned up and say, was it really Labor's fault, or You know, can you guys really do any better? So I'm just going to say what most people are saying, and that the coalition are going to pick up Lingiari, but Labour are going to maintain Solomon. I missed out on one seat, which is Macquarie, which that should have just been a Labour keep this whole time. And so that's the final numbers. I believe it adds up to 150. Let's see. 132, 137, 138, 139. Yep. Right, so as you can see here, Labour have cracked 70, so they would need 6 to govern. I believe this would end up with a minority Labour Party government. I don't see a path for the coalition to get government from here. And I think this is generally the view of most people at the moment, that the Labour Party are going to end up in minority government somewhere between 68 and 74 seats, something like that. And they'll need a couple of teal independents to govern. Not many people believe at this point that the coalition will be able to win government, but if the coalition do get a result like this, where they do pick up a couple of seats, it will probably be a reason for Peter Dutton to stay on as leader, and it will be definitely a shot against Albo, but I don't think it will necessarily be a reason to push him out unless, of course, Labour completely lose government, e.g., get a similar number or under seats than the coalition government. So my prediction at the moment is a minority Labour government with teal independent support or independent support in general. I don't see any path for coalition victory at this point, and the MRP polling from only a couple of months ago also stated that fact. And in fact, in that poll, I believe it gave Labour something like 79 seats or something like that. So we are going to talk about the Senate. Once again, I'm just going to go over these. I'm not going to go into big detail here. I believe 2 in every state apart from Queensland is going to go to the major parties. Now in Queensland, One Nation probably will pick up a seat here. That is that Malcolm Roberts up for election. Pauline Hanson was up for election last time, but I think One Nation generally have been polling pretty well, and I don't see them losing that seat. Malcolm Roberts has been a pretty damn stable One Nation representative compared to what kind of people they've had in the past. So, yeah, I think One Nation is retaining that seat for them. The big question is if the Labour Party will manage to pick up 2 seats or the Greens will manage to pick up 1. I think the Greens will manage to pick up 1. I think Labour picking up 2 is sort of like, we aren't sure about that because there could be quite a big swing against Labour and they could get a result similar to what they did in 2019, maybe not as badly, but even if it is a two-party vote of 55-45 or 56-46, that is going to make it difficult for the Labour Party to pick up 2 seats in Queensland. So the other options for that final seat in Queensland are the coalition picking up 3 seats, or possibly, I mean, the UAP, probably not. I don't even know if Palmer is running, and it won't be under the UAP name. The other option is Gerard Rennick, who has quit the LNP and is going to be running as a independent. I mean, he's going to make his own party just so he can run above the line. It's not actually because he wants to make his own party or run any other candidates. There is definitely a chance that he could pick up that final seat here at the expense of Labour. I think, if anything, him running has perhaps denied the coalition a 3rd seat there. He is quite popular, and I think his campaign will be quite strong. But there's a chance he might only end up with, like, I don't know, 2 or 3% or something like that. Queensland is always a very competitive state, and sort of the Conservative vote is always split there amongst like a bunch of different parties. So for now, I'm just going to say Labor are going to pick up 2 seats, but we'll see. So the Greens, I think, are going to pick up a seat in every state. I don't think they're going to have any issue. As I said, they're not going backwards. Now the question is, I'll quickly do the territories. David Pocock will almost certainly win again, with Labor getting the other seat in ACT. These last seats in each state, really, the coalition have had a swing towards them on the primary vote since the last election. So that suggests that it wouldn't be too difficult for them to pick up the final seats in some of these states. So I think in New South Wales, the coalition will pick up that final seat. In WA, I think probably the coalition will pick up that final seat. In Tasmania, I think that final seat is going to go to Lambie. Lambie is actually up for election this time. She has had a lot of her representatives leave the party, but I think her herself is still reasonably popular enough to win the final seat there just off her own name. These two seats, I'm going to say that One Nation is going to win at least one extra Senate seat at the next federal election. I think South Australia is the most likely place for them to pick it up, given on some strong results from 3 different news polls in the past year, which had them at 10% or higher. And this final seat in Victoria, it's always the mystery seat in these Senate elections, it seems. It's always the one I'm least sure on because it is the sort of the least conservative state apart from Tasmania, and then of course Tasmania has Jackie Lambie. So this final seat, I don't know. So I put Palmer on here. The United Australia Party could run, but they can't call themselves the United Australia Party because of ScoMo's rules. ScoMo made these rules about party names and they got deregistered, so they can't call themselves United Australia Party. So they could call themselves like the Palmer Australia Party or something like that, or Palmer's Party, or I don't know, or Clive Palmer Team or something like that. They could call themselves that or something and run and possibly pick up that last seat. They did it last time, and there is still a sort of a sizable sort of like right wing minor party vote there. But I mean, of course, last election there was the whole COVID thing, and they ran on the anti-COVID lockdown stuff, and that isn't such a big issue. This time, there's also 2 new challenges here, which are Purple Pingers. I actually don't know his real name. He did say his real name in his most recent video, but I can't remember it. Purple Pingers is running for the Victorian Socialists. Maybe the Victorian Socialists will get a couple percentage swings towards them because of this, the rental crisis and stuff like that. But I don't think they have a chance of picking up a seat. The Cannabis Party got 3% last time. I don't think they're going to have what Fiona Patton used to be the leader of the Sex Party in Reason. She's running, so I think they might get a couple of percentage towards them. But in the nature of these Senate elections where you have 6 senators per state, it just tends to be that, like, on average, 3 seats go to the left and 3 seats go to the right. Tasmania is a bit different because Tasmania is sort of a very left-wing state, in my opinion. So that's why you get someone like Jackie Lambie, who's sort of like a centrist or sort of centre-left, picking up that last seat. But Victoria, it's looking like there is going to be a small swing to the coalition there. And the right still picked up 3 Senate seats last election. So I think it's going to be a right-wing pickup, and with a bit of a swing towards the coalition, I'm going to just say, I'm just going to go out in a dark here and say the coalition is going to pick up that last seat in Victoria. Even with Peter Dutton as leader. Yeah. All right, so this is my Senate prediction. It's not really a big change from the status quo, I don't think. It's not a terrible result for the Labor Party. It's not great either, picking up 2 seats in every state. And I mean, it's fine, I guess. The Labor Party will need 2 of the crossbench plus the Greens in order to pass anything. Let's see if they can pass anything without the Greens or the coalition. Let's see. 26 plus 3, that's 29, 30, 31, 35. No dice. So they will need the Greens plus 2 more. They could get One Nation. They could get Lambie and Palmer. They could get a couple of independents. So it won't be too difficult for them. Maybe a little bit more difficult than last time, just because you've got these independents, doing whatever they want to do. And those independents, by the way, are Tammy Tyrrell, David Pocock, Lydia Thorpe, and Fatima Payman. One of them is a previous Labor, so you would assume that she would vote with Labor Party because she only quit because supposedly the Labor Party forced her out. So there's also a good chance Fatima Payman might start her own party, and that might be what runs in the seat of Watson. Well, I don't know. My prediction for this election, for this upcoming federal election, is that this will be the most unpredictable federal election in decades. There are so many actors. There is a huge chance of a minority government that we haven't, and a huge crossbench. There is the biggest chance of uncertainty after this election with how many crossbenches there is going to probably be, and how weak both of the major parties are going to be. Both of them, possibly both of them under 70 seats. I think the major party vote is going to be a record low, or it was already a record low last election. I think it's going to be even more of a record low next election, especially in the Senate. This is going to be the hardest election, I think, to predict, and I I believe there's a good chance that even though I waited this long to make this prediction, that I could be completely off. If there was an election held today, I think something like this would probably be the result. But there's a good chance Labour will pick up a few more seats. There's a slightly less chance that Labour will do worse than this. I still don't think there's a chance for the coalition to win unless Alba absolutely, screws up, or the Labour Party just completely fall apart or something like that. It's not looking like the coalition will win at this stage. That's all I can really say. It's not looking like it's going to happen. Big crossbench in both the House and the Senate. So going to be very messy times after the next election, I think. This has been Aussie's Elect. Thank you for watching. I will be doing smaller videos on the states. I'm also probably going to be doing another shorter prediction video once we get the final redistributions. As you can see here, I sort of did a very crude edit of this map to add Bullwinkle here. I sort of cut off a bit of Perth, and then I combined Kooyong and Higgins here, and then North Sydney and Bradfield over here. Just sort of a crude edit. This is still the 2022 redistributions map, just slightly edited so I could add and subtract some seats. So forgive me for that, but yeah, I will probably do another small prediction video after we get a final redistribution, which I think will be pretty similar to the one that was suggested by the AEC earlier this year. Okay, goodbye everybody.